Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the HRD podcast, where we talk with HR directors and people directors about their journey into HR, get their insight into the current trends in the world of work, and take their advice on the future of HR and how HR professionals can deliver value and progress their career. I'm Nick Elliott, employment lawyer, and I'm really excited to welcome Karen Jewell, HR director at Equip Outdoor Technologies. Welcome, Karen.
Good morning, thank you.
No problem. We'll talk a bit about what companies, what brands sit in front of Equip Outdoor Technologies in a minute. In fact, do you want to talk about Equip to start with? Explain what that's about, and then we'll look at your journey into HR?
Yeah, Equip is all about our brands, and therein lies one of the challenges that we have as an organisation at the moment. So Equip is the name behind RAB and Low Alpine, our technical outdoor performance brands. I think most people will have heard of RAB. We've had a significant growth over the last few years, certainly in the UK, and I'll come on to that in terms of the challenges that's presented.
Absolutely.
So that is Equip, more to come.
So what kind of products do RAB and...
Okay, so historically, RAB was always the apparel brand. Yep. So the clothing side of things with some equipment, and historically Low Alpine were the packs. But we do a bit of everything now under both of those. So apparel and equipment.
Great stuff. So when I was preparing for the podcast, Karen, we've known each other a little while, but one of the things that struck me was quite how diverse your kind of CV is in terms of the places you've worked and the roles that you've had within those. Do you want to kind of start us at the beginning and talk us through that?
Yeah, happy to. And yes, diverse is probably a very good way of putting it, isn't it? Yes, definitely. So I started off on the good old-fashioned graduate milk round. Yep. Remember that? I bet many of our listeners probably won't, which definitely ages me. Yeah, absolutely. So for those that don't know, you went through university, you got to the end of close to the end of the final year, and in what on earth do I do now? And you attend the graduate recruitment fairs and you find the best place to basically start a management development program. So that's where I started. I was originally going to go into the police force, believe it or not.
Okay.
For one reason or another, that didn't work out for me. Yep. So I sat in the careers office at university, flicking through, and very close to police in P was personnel.
Perfect.
And people think that's a joke, but it's a very true story.
Excellent.
So I was very fortunate to land a management development role with what was East Midlands Electricity at the time. And that was basically fabulous for me. I got a really good grounding in all aspects of personnel, now HR. It was newly privatised when I joined it. Commercial themes were starting to gather momentum alongside the challenges of a very old-fashioned management structure and practices. So it was very good, worked through all aspects of HR. But the bit I enjoyed the most was actually working in the operational districts. So I spent some fabulous time in the Mansfield district, actually out there at the sharp end. I think I was there during the snowstorms of 1990, basically trying to find accommodation for the 1,000 or so workers that had come in from all the other regions to try and put the lights back on. So, real experience. It was absolutely fabulous getting to know what that business was about. And did a little bit of time in strategic planning as well. So worked in some of the corporate functions. And that was around the time when, just as the telecoms industry was starting to open up to competition. So we were looking at options for utilities moving into telecoms. Seems a hell of a long time ago now. And there's a lot of history in front of that. So completed my graduate traineeship in about 18 months and started in a permanent role in employee relations. And that was really my sort of grounds, cutting my teeth on lots of modernisation agendas, influencing change, changing working practices. Dare I say the whole 2P and outsourcing agenda was a massive, massive thing in those days. And my challenge was basically to find a way around it all. How can we make this work? How can we achieve what we want to achieve whilst being fair and true to our employees? So that was my introduction. First HR manager job was fabulous. Again, it was within the wider umbrella of East Midlands Electricity at the time. But my first senior role was with electrical installation. an electrical contracting business. The only unregulated part of the business was EMEC Limited. We had complete freedom, and it was the commercial sharp end, and it was absolutely fabulous. When I joined, we had just turned around from a loss-making business, and when I left, we were a very profitable organisation. So it was proper sharp end, proper commercial. Cash flow is king, making decisions that really matter all of the time. So that was where I ended up. Powergen then bought East Midlands Electricity, and I was very fortunate to land a role on the senior management team for HR. Did lots of things, as you've already intimated from my CV. What did I do? Central policy roles, UK Employee Relations Manager, took on a HR manager role to drive digital transformation in the function. And my last job there was as the HR manager for their energy trading business. So the beasts out there that buy and sell and hedge. And that was East Midlands Electricity and Powergen.
And where next?
So all part of my life plan, I decided to start a family at that point. And took time out. So it was my decision to take time out and focus on raising my daughter. But I got a bit bored, and I know that's a terrible thing to say. It probably won't go on too well, and I love her dearly. Shout out to Emma. And needed something really, I think, to focus the other part of my identity, and didn't necessarily want to go back into HR. Wanted to do something a little bit different, and found a role that was a few steps down in terms of responsibility, which worked well for me at the time. Job sharing the management of the external consultation team for Derby City Council. So they were the team that would connect with the public on statutory consultation, so be it the budget or particular policy formation. And it was a fabulous, fabulous team and a really good experience. I really enjoyed it. It's absolutely great.
But somehow you ended up in HR again.
Yeah, somehow I always end up back in HR, don't we? Don't we just? So I think within a couple of years of working in a non-HR environment, I ended up taking on and leading some HR change projects. Herein lies a theme. And within about 5 years of that, I was the HR director for Derby City Council. A very different experience. I learned a lot about me, learned a lot about other sectors and other people. The start of that was very exciting, very positive, lots of OD change initiatives. But in the latter years of my time at the council, it was all about austerity and delivering the measures that came through. So two very marked differences.
And I think it's always interesting when people have worked both private sector and public sector. What do you kind of see the key differences there in terms of HR and the role that you get to play?
Yeah, I think in terms of HR, I mean, there's certainly a myth I would wish to explode. A lot of people talk very negatively about the work ethos of public sector employees. Do you know what? From the people I had the privilege of working with at the local government in Derby, you would not find anywhere any more committed, hardworking, dedicated people. Yeah, regardless of the profession. That's not just HR. And that goes for everywhere I've worked. Yeah, you can't badge people on effort. I think what I learned, the key difference for me is all about the leadership and it's all about the objectives. It's very difficult in local government because actually I don't think there's one shared common objective. In the private sector, it's much clearer. There's a very clear objective and it usually has a pound sign on it or a euro sign if we want to be politically correct. It's not so in local government. You are trying to deliver so many competing priorities with a very limited amount of money. And as a result, accountability's invisible at leadership level. And party politics, unfortunately, come into play, and it makes it almost impossible people to work to any form of long-term plan, strategic aims, and deliver efficiently and effectively towards that. That's my experience, my opinion. I'm sure many others would feel different, but personally, that's what I took away from it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So after that, what was next on the journey?
Yeah, so I left there in 2014. If I'm absolutely honest, I didn't have a plan at the time, because actually that wasn't part of the plan. I decided it was time to look for completely different opportunities for me, take a bit of time out, regroup, and with the support of some fabulous people in my network, I tried a number of different things. So I started doing freelance, which I really enjoyed. very grateful for the support I had of Penny Strutton from Think Forward Consulting, who actually coincidentally was my exec coach while I was at the council. So the relationship with Penny continued, and I worked with Penny on a number of exec coaching programs, which was fabulous for me. And through that, sort of got introduced to a number of other SMEs, commercial, again, sharp commercial end of things, which was absolutely fabulous. I also did some volunteer work. I think one of the best experiences I had at the time was as a trustee of a regional charity. A shout out to the Bridge, East Midlands, a small organisation that really, really punch above their weight. They are all about preventing homelessness, and they do some absolutely fabulous work. So for 5 years, I supported them as a member of their board, and that was brilliant. I worked with a couple of other charities, Mind, for example, supported them on some HR projects. And again, something completely different. I got into the world of commercial due diligence, can you believe, through a company called Armstrong Consulting. So that was brilliant. That was fundamentally, they support mid-market private equity markets. And, you know, you've got buyers and sellers. They provide the commercial due diligence into the market, the commercial opportunities, risks, etc., etc. And I would work as a specialist consultant, supporting them on looking for the evidence, putting together the commercial case for do you, don't you buy. Absolutely brilliant. Really, really loved that.
And having spoken to you during that time, that was so different to any organisation that you'd ever been involved with, was my impression.
Yes, completely
different.
In
what ways?
I guess I'm raising my hands now and gesturing.
Comes across beautifully on the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. Audio description. So if you think large, slow, encumbered local authority at one of the end of the spectrum to the we've got some money, how fast can we double it environment? It doesn't get much different. It was fabulous for me. It was great because I think there's a theme to what makes me tick and what I enjoy, and it's very much the commercial reality of things. I probably no great surprise that my education was economics. So I've always had that interest and that intrigue with how businesses work and the kind of sharp end of commercial. And it doesn't get sharper than that. So I did the commercial due diligence, but I also, you might be surprised, ended up doing some HROD work for them as well, because I never managed to get away from it, do I? Never. So we started there. The guy that ran the organisation and owned it, he was doing a fabulous job, but he wanted to grow the business and be able to step away within a fixed period of time. So I worked with him on a plan to develop the team, develop the business, look at the core competencies that we'd need to strengthen if he were to step away and that business was going to continue to grow. So, I worked on probably a really sharp end OD project. And we hit those objectives.
Brilliant.
Here we are, however many years further on, and he's living the life.
Excellent.
The team is very successful.
And then Equip?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Equip.
Yeah, let's talk about
It's
Equip.
exciting.
It is, absolutely. So I worked with Equip originally when I worked with Think Forward Consulting. So for a couple of years, I was supporting them with some exec coaching for senior management and the board members. I was also working on a number of projects around culture change and values. And Equip were a company with big ambitions at the time, big growth potential. And we were brought in to work with them on how we could affect that change in terms of the organisation.
And in terms of that, the scale of the business at that point, how many people, what kind of turnover, what markets are you operating in?
Yeah. So at the time, predominantly UK. Well, certainly the majority was UK, but a number of international subsidiaries. Headcount wise, about 100, maybe slightly more than about 100. Turnover wise, around about the 50 to 60 mark. Yeah. Obviously 50 to 60 is a big figure.
And we're talking million.
We're talking, we're talking million. So that's where we were at the time. Do you want to know where we are now? Or shall I leave that hanging
take us
now?
on the journey.
Shall I take you on the journey?
Well, partly because one of the things that I love about the business is, and what you've achieved in the relatively short time that you've been there, is the growth and you know, things like the number of people you've brought in and all that kind of thing, which we'll come to. But just to fill the gap.
A teaser. So where are we now? We're just about to come to the end of our financial year. We have globally about 240 employees now. And in the last 12 months, we hit our 100 million turnover mark. So
amazing.
That gives you some idea. And that's a 3-year period.
So what's driven that?
What's driven that? Lots of things. We have solid brands. RAB is a very authentic brand and has a history, because people think we're new, but we're not. Just last year was the 40th anniversary of RAB.
Okay.
And RAB was started by a climber called Rab Carrington, who made sleeping bags in Sheffield. And it's grown through, I guess, a specialism in down and insulation into what it is today. And it's a very authentic brand. So we don't try to be or pretend to be anything that we're not. We're authentic and we're responsible. People will have their RAB jacket they've had for years because it works. It's technical, it's performance, it keeps you warm, it helps you do what you do. And there's no airs or graces or pretenses around it. So we had that recipe, if you like. We had that recipe for success, strong, authentic brand, strong in the UK and growing in the overseas markets. Our growth plans were very much to expand and continue more so overseas, and to not quite integrate Low Alpine into RAB. They are still different and distinct brands, but to look at our categories, products, and make sure we've got a clear distinction between what RAB is about and what Low Alpine is about. And they're actually complementary, not competing products and product lines. Those were our ambitions, lots of overseas growth, lots of pushing to increase in the UK. We were already the leading brand in the UK, but we could see much, much more potential. And then COVID hit. I mean, I'm almost embarrassed to bring back the COVID word at this stage.
Well, most people I've talked to on the podcast, that was a very difficult time for the business. They were furloughing people, revenues hit, it was generally not a positive thing, but actually quite a different story for you guys.
It was very much a different story for us. I mean, I'm let's be clear, we had exactly the same challenges. I mean, I went into COVID. I joined Equip on the payroll as the director in January 2020, just to give you some idea. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect timing.
At that point, I didn't have any operational responsibility for HR, but by the end of that year, I did. So my agenda was to come in and very much make sure, from an OD point of view, that the organisation was ready to sustain and deliver that growth, which was fabulous. It's a great, great project to be working on. And we started 2020 with bold plans to expand the workforce to start with. I mean, I've already given you the figures. So, there was an investment needed really in increasing capacity, not just numbers, but skills and everything else. That's true OD agenda. So that was our plan. And then COVID hit. And if I take myself back there, just forgive me while I just have a moment of reflection, grip the table.
So, I was going to say, some deep breathing.
Absolutely. Grip the table quite hard here. I recall us having staff together and announcing, I think it was probably towards the beginning of March, that what we were going to do internally was to integrate in our products department and our marketing departments. We were going to integrate the separate brand teams.
Okay.
So our RAB and our Low Alpine separate teams were going to come together. And there was a very, very sensible business reason for doing that. So we announced that. A week later, we went into lockdown and working from home. But I mean, one of the industries that benefited from COVID was the outdoors. That was basically all we had.
We were all doing that.
Everybody was doing it.
Even those that weren't keen on it initially.
Everybody was doing it. It was the only thing we had. So from an industry perspective, that was all incredibly positive. And so obviously there was a little jitter at the beginning of that year when it all started, because people were careful, were reserved. They didn't know what was coming. But as that continued, sales picked up. And, the outdoors remained open and we gained new business. We also gained new business because of, again, I come back to, as a company, not just as a brand, as a company, we are very authentic and responsible. And we looked after everybody. We looked after our stakeholders. We looked after our employees. Yes, some people were furloughed where we needed to, but they received full pay. We tried to make sure that we had all the support in place. We're a wholesale business. So our customers are retailers, the big retailers, and lots of high quality independent retailers as well. We looked after our retailers. We gave special terms. They didn't know whether they were going to be able to sell through what they'd pre-ordered. So we looked after them, and we looked after our suppliers. We do some manufacturing still in the UK. I'm very proud to say so. We still do our downfilling of sleeping bags and our specialist sort of expedition wear. We still manufacture and fill at our factory up in Somercotes.
Yep.
But we also have, obviously, a network of factories across the world. And we looked after them too. What we didn't do was cancel orders. Took a very, very brave, some would have said foolish at the time, decision to still place those orders and still honour those orders. And we didn't break the trust relationship we have with our retailers by suddenly flogging everything online, direct to consumer. A lot of our competitors did. We didn't.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we didn't. So we retained the loyalty of the wholesalers. And then as the sales picked up, as we went through the COVID period, when our competitors suddenly couldn't provide the retailers as the business started to boom again.
Yes.
They couldn't provide the goods because they'd cancelled the orders and they'd cancelled the production. We were able to come in and provide when others couldn't. So for us, that was a fairly significant step change.
And I guess created opportunity out of that bravery almost, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, true to brand, true to our values, and something that we're incredibly, incredibly proud of. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a positive story in terms of sales continuing, but we're still trying to manage that with the uncertainty of what the future brings, employees partly furloughed because obviously not all functions were back to normal. We're still trying to work from home. We're still trying to do all of those things that were alien to us 16th of March, 2020. So from an HR perspective, the team was busier than ever. So I stepped in to help support and take us through that with what we needed to do.
Yeah. So in terms of, it would be great to talk about workforce expansion, because I know that when we probably first caught up about Equip, one of the things that really struck me was the number of people that you had recruited and onboarded within a very, very short space of time in a market where talent is tight and it's difficult to find people and recruit them and pay them well and all those things. How have you approached that?
Yep. So I guess 2020 wasn't a period of workforce expansion. It was a difficult time. We didn't know where things were going to go. So we had a brief period of time in which we didn't fill vacancies, and a brief period of time in which a couple of unfortunate roles had to go. But that sort of came round again, turned around, and we started 2021 with a 2-year workforce expansion plan to deliver in 1 year, just to give you some idea.
Ambitious.
Very ambitious. Very, very ambitious. But we filled our vacancies. We filled our vacancies. I'm just trying to think numbers wise. The majority of those were in the UK. I think at one point we were onboarding 2 new people a week in our office site in the UK. And I've already given you the numbers and the context, so you'll understand what that looks like. We had new roles across the entire business in every single department. So designers, development specialists, marketing, finance, sales, our buying team, as things picked up again. Big investment that everywhere we had new vacancies.
And so what was the key to your success? How were you able to fill them when others weren't?
I think the strength of the brand. You know, locally, people know us. Our experience, and as we worked through it, I mean, to begin with, it was quite difficult. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we haven't encountered some difficulty in recruiting. We have, the same as everybody else. That didn't result in us not filling vacancies. It just meant it took a little bit longer to do it. So what we were probably aiming to achieve over 12 months took 15 months. And there are still some vacancies that we struggle to recruit to. You know, that's inevitable. I think what helped at the time is we've never struggled with turnover issues. You know, our turnover is significantly below what the UK average is. What's that about at the moment? About 16%,
probably.
I think. We're about the 10% mark. And our turnover is typically within our entry-level roles, where there's inevitably going to be significant competition. But we plug away. We fill our vacancies through the traditional route. We don't use agencies. We've created our own internal agency of expertise in the recruitment team. So each and every vacancy, my team get to know the candidates. They're with the candidates right the way through that process. We use LinkedIn very, very well, particularly where we've got more specialist vacancies. And by specialist, I mean our sort of designers, et cetera, where it's a relatively small pond that you're fishing in, particularly for the outdoors. So we search, we approach, we encourage, we keep a talent pool so that we're going back to people that we may have not selected first time around. And we use our employees to help fill vacancies. Our employees are our customers. There's a very strong, loyal commitment to the brand, to the outdoors. Our people work for us because of that connection. And we encourage our employees to refer and source and promote. And we do that through our partners. We do that through lots of different routes now that we probably didn't do before. And it's working.
It's great. And people are sticking around and liking it in the main.
People are sticking around. Yeah. This is a strange thing to say, but you have to have a particular skill set to thrive in our company. We're fast, we're dynamic. The pace is very fast.
Yep.
We don't hang about. If we see an opportunity, we take it. If we see a risk, we very quickly take action accordingly. If we want to do something new or we have an idea, then you might have 4, 5, 6, 7 different options. We'll probably start all 7 of them. What we don't do is wait 6 months and evaluate and just start one.
Yes.
So that gives you some idea of the type of organisation that we are.
Yeah.
And that works for some people, but equally it doesn't work for others.
It might drive some people mad.
It might drive some people mad. So we are very careful as part of our selection process to make that very clear to people, because this has to be obviously a two-way process. It's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? But, are we right for you? It's not just, are you right for us? So we put a lot of time and effort into helping people understand the culture, the demands of the organisation, but equally the rewards.
That's interesting. And talking of rewards, I know that you've kind of been through a kind of pay and grading reward type exercise fairly recently. Clearly that links into retention and recruitment. Talk me through how you've approached that. Yeah. How that's going.
Okay, very much so. So that was the big project of last year, really. We've grown quickly, very quickly. A lot of people joined us during lockdown and working from home. So we've still got a lot of work to do to sort of recreate consistency and bring that whole culture back together again. One of the things where we needed to create more consistency and more transparency was around pay and grading. So throughout last year, we worked on bringing in a broad job family competency-based grading structure that goes across all of our job families and activities in the UK. We've started in the UK. We'll go on to doing this overseas as well, and looked at what it takes to do a job well in Equip at every level. So we're working on, our core competencies and our behavioural side of things linked to our values, but we're also looking at the technical skill set as well. So we're working on, having visible career pathways. As we grow, one of the things we know we need to do is home grow talent, and we are quite successful at that. So let's home grow, particularly in some of the complex technical areas where the market is quite small. So we're putting that in. We're putting frameworks to enable people to come in at a relatively junior level, development point, if you like, and work their way through, and hopefully loyalty to the brand and their experience continue to thrive with the organisation. Yeah. That's been a positive. That's been well received. Yep. But alongside that, obviously, is pay and benefits. And we've approached that completely differently and put in benchmark roles, benchmark salaries, and bandings that allow people to progress, are closely aligned with the market. I'm not saying they weren't before, but it's about bringing consistency across all of our career paths and all of our roles. So bringing those in. Making sure there's scope for progression. We also standardised all of our contracts, as you know, reviewed many of our terms and conditions to make sure we'd got consistency and increased our holiday entitlement. And it's generally gone very, very well. And
you mentioned kind of market pressures as well. Are you losing out to other people pinching candidates or your people even? Because they're paying more. That cost of living crisis is big at the minute. At the point we're recording the podcast, salary pressure is rife. Are you experiencing that too?
Everywhere you go, you hear about it, don't you? That's what the media tells us. Of course we are, the same as anybody else, know. And that's the role of our recruitment agencies out there, isn't it? Because they will always wave in some cases, a very high figure and tempt people away. We offer more than just pay. We offer good pay. We've done well as an organisation, and therefore we have been able to give very good significant salary increases over the last 2 years. One of the things we've also done is occasionally in the past, we've given one-off bonuses. What we decided to do was to integrate that into the salaries. So our employees have had the benefit of that significant additional percentage actually put into their basic pay. So for example, 1st of February, we're giving an 8% pay award to all UK staff, and similar and equivalent related figures for across all our subsidiaries as well. That would have been a different percentage and a bonus. And the feedback we've had is that that's very, very much appreciated.
Okay.
So that's what we do. That's what we're doing. We offer a lot more. It's not just pay. It's not just holidays. We are putting a lot of time and effort into the whole development agenda. And that is my priority for the next 12 months for certain. We have LinkedIn learning licenses for all of our employees globally. So we're offering access and encouraging access, and there is no limit on what you can use on there. You know, it's not just related to your job. If you are motivated by development, you know, if we go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're at the higher end of that, there are opportunities for you. And it's not limited. It's there. It's open. It's accessible. What we need to do now is bring that more efficiently into the workplace, link that in with the competencies and how people can use that in an efficient way to take them forward. We've also invested a lot in wellbeing, mental health and wellbeing, and that's a particular passion of mine, as you know. You know, we've never shied away from it, and we don't shy away from it. We started to step up our approach in 2020 when COVID hit. So we put a lot of effort into communication and support. We, like many, have had a traditional EAP to begin with, but it wasn't well used. It wasn't accessed. People that were having difficulties were either keeping it to themselves or they were talking to HR about it. And there was a pretty hefty workload. Were we any worse than anybody else in the country? No, I don't think we were. We were following the national trends and the national averages. But that doesn't mean we don't have a responsibility to do something about it. We have, I think, 9 or 10 now employees who have been trained as mental health first aiders. We call them wellbeing champions. They're across our sites and in our warehouse as well. We signed up to the UK Thrive at Work Charter initially at the beginning of 21, just to give us some kind of framework for what we wanted to do on mental health and wellbeing. And then I think one of the big changes we made last April, we got rid of our EAP and we signed up to a more specialist mental health wellbeing support service. We work with a company called Plum. So what they do is, unlike your EAP, where it's kind of a small layer of intervention, this is much more about building self-awareness, education, self-support, and then intervention is at the very end of that process. So just to give you some idea, there are training courses available. They do webinars on lots of topics. You know, it's not just about work. It's about managing life and the demands of life that impact us all. There are toolkits, meditation, practical steps that they can all take. There's chat therapy. And therapy is a very strong term. But, you know, if you just want to, and you certainly think of the digital age now where communication seems to come from your thumb rather than your mouth. So for people who don't want to be in that difficult situation, or it can be quite an oppressive situation where you're talking face to face with someone about something that's very hard. You can start, the entry level for this is a chat, a WhatsApp, or whatever it may be. And then the higher end of that are the face-to-face therapy sessions. So we've invested in that. 45% of our global workforce have signed up to that. And this provides support globally, and the support is available in, I've lost count of how many languages, but it covers all our needs, our global needs for the organisation. And it's proven to be an incredibly valuable tool.
Really interesting. One of the other things that you've touched on, I think, a little was the sustainability agenda as well. So we're talking about development, people agenda. I know that's really important to you and the business. Talk us through that a little bit.
Yes. Now, when I first started working with Equip and we were talking about values, this was something that was coming up quite a lot from staff, and the importance of sustainability and wanting to push sustainability. And if I fast forward to where we are now, it's quite phenomenal, but it's true Equip and RAB style, because what we don't do is start talking about things and intent. We do it, then we talk about it afterwards. So our sustainability agenda has come on in leaps and bounds, but we are very authentic and very real about what we're doing. And again, I come back to that's one of our strengths. So we became climate neutral in 2019, and that was our first achievement. And that's when we started talking about it. We didn't do all the greenwashing that many organizations do about how we're going to get there and what we're going to do and, come up with 15 different definitions of sustainable. We started by becoming climate neutral. And climate neutral, I don't know, I'm not going to get into the detail of definitions and what have you, but climate neutral is where you balance your emissions through offsetting. And that's really the first stage. So we achieved that. We have been climate neutral for 3 years. We are, I think, in the process of categorizing the data for the fourth. And that is something that we've achieved. All of the behavioral changes behind it. I'm trying to think, our offsetting partners, we support a Caribbean forest in Africa. And we're also supporting a hydroelectricity scheme in Vietnam where we have factories. So it's all about contributing and continuing what we're doing. Yeah. But that isn't enough for us. So yes, we're climate neutral, but actually we want to go further than that. We've given a commitment to reach net zero in 2030. The difference there is that net zero means zero emissions. There is no offsetting. Yeah. And that is through all of your channels. That's a massive, massive task. Yeah. But that's something we are striving towards. And that's at the heart of what we do. Everything that we do, every department, every supplier relationship, that's what we talk about. And if you work for RAB and you're all about the outdoors, taking that responsibility is a big issue.
Yeah. Well, and it fits so well with the brand in that way too, doesn't it?
Yeah. We've just actually, interestingly, I think in the last couple of weeks, we've just launched a new initiative, which is, I'm going to be quite bold about it. It's an industry-leading initiative called Material Facts. So I'll try and do it in a very non-technical way. It comes back to how we define sustainable, because we hear lots of companies, lots of organizations using that word in so many different ways, but there's no clear claim on what sustainable is. What we're doing is providing people with the raw data, if you like. So if you think of key claims, everything's recycled. What we will be doing in future for all our products, there will be data available on the percentage of recycled materials in a product, but breaking that down into components. So it won't just be an overarching figure or an overarching claim. We'll break that down. We'll tell you what percentage is recycled in the fabrics, in the outer fabric, in the lining, in the insulation, in the zip, in the trim. Yeah, we're not hiding anywhere. We're also doing the same in terms of fluorocarbons. Yeah, so are our products free of fluorocarbon? Yeah, and we'll tell you if they are. And again, we'll break that down to the fabric, the insulation, the zips, the trim. So we're taking a completely different approach and putting all of that raw data out for people to make that decision for themselves. We're not making claims. We're showing you what it is. I think we've likened it to nutritional information on food and drink products. Yeah. So we're leading the outdoor industry on being open and transparent. Massive task. Yeah, you can imagine, to get that data, absolutely, to present it in a way. But that's what we're about.
Well, and incredibly brave as well, I think, isn't it? That's a big step.
It's a big step.
It's almost vulnerability in it as well, I guess.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It sounds great.
Yeah, but we're honest. We're authentic. That's what we do.
It's fantastic. Jumping around a little bit, one of the other things that it's kind of a standing question, I suppose, on the podcast when I'm talking to very senior, experienced HR people is, if you were starting a career in HR now, what advice would you give to people looking to get into that profession and take that route?
Yeah. It's a difficult thing to say, isn't it? Because it's different. For me, it's very different based on whatever type of company you're with or whatever industry or sector you go into. The first piece of advice I think I would give is have a very clear understanding of what you want to achieve and what matters to you. Yeah. And this is going to sound like I'm dissing my own profession. But if you go into HR thinking that you're going to be popular, if you're thinking that you're you like working with people and that you're going to be automatically respected because of your job title, forget it. That would be my first piece of advice. Yeah. If you like hard work, if you like having to jump through intellectual hoops and rethink situations 15 times over, if you like honing your influencing skills, if you like tackling the almost impossible to do challenges and you are not too concerned about feeding your ego, HR's for you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Is that cruel?
No, I think it's honest.
Yep.
Again, it fits with what you've talked about in terms of your business. I think it's very honest. There's often a negative perception of HR people in organisations, isn't there?
I think so. Unfairly so. I've worked with absolutely fabulous people who've chosen HR as a profession. And if you like variety and challenge, it's a very, very good career track, as I've said. But you need to understand the company you're working for. And for me, that's the key, knowing your business.
Well, and that was one of the things that knowing you and, even what you've shared today, commerciality or being aligned with the commercial objectives of the business for HR, I think it's talked about a lot, but actually doing it is sometimes tricky for people. What kind of advice would you give on that front? How do you do that? How do you be more commercial in inverted commas?
For me, that's the key to it. If you want to be of value to a company, you need to understand it. You need to understand what success looks like, what the ambitions of the organisation are, what factors influence it, what the plans are, what issues need to be tackled. You need to have that complete understanding of the business. There's the business as a whole, but then in larger organisations, and particularly if you're in a business partner role in HR or aspire to a business partner, that particular business area, that particular department, where does it fit into that strategy, that action plan, what it is all about. If you don't understand your business and the commercial challenges of that business, you cannot add value through people. And I say to my team now, you have to do that. You have to be a commercial business professional first. You just happen to bring the people expertise. And you have to establish your credibility on understanding that. I've seen too many HR professionals who think that's for the managers to do and that they sit there and say yes or no, or this is the process, this is the policy, off you go and do it. That's absolutely not the case. You are a good HR professional is there to facilitate that change, is there to enable that change. Yes, we have to bring our professional advice to bear and point out risks and point out the challenges and sometimes provide an alternative way. But fundamentally, what is it that this business needs from you and from its people? And then help them achieve it. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely help them achieve it. That makes so much sense and excellent advice. One of the other things that we do on the podcast is called a supplier shout out. Yes. So we don't have a sponsor for the podcast. That's not a problem. But what we try and do is kind of ask our guests to shout out for a particular supplier that they have enjoyed working with, that have delivered value for them in their business. It can be to do with Equip or HR or maybe even something else. Do you have any thoughts on that? Firstly, I'd like to call out Think Forward Consulting and Penny Strutton, who runs that. Penny is an absolutely fantastic business coach and gave me credible support and advice and coaching experience in the past. So a shout out and a thank you to Penny. Can I shout you out, an actor? No, you're not allowed to do that. Can I not do that? No. Okay. That's banned on the podcast. But thank you. Fabulous legal team. No, okay, I'll leave that there. Thank you. So I think we're coming near to the end of our time today. I've really enjoyed chatting. One of the other things that I know, having spoken to you over a period of time and that I've kind of picked up from today, is that you are looking after people well at Equip. Yes. What kind of initiatives do you have on that side of things? Yeah. I mean, obviously we try to, but looking after people doesn't mean you get everything right for everybody, but it's trying to provide options and courses of action. So, I mean, we know, obviously, we talked about what we've done on our pay and grading. We've talked about what we've tried to do in terms of keeping pace with rising costs. There's a lot in the media, obviously, at the moment, isn't there, about employers not chasing inflation with pay awards and obviously thus driving wage inflation, but we still have a responsibility to help our employees. One of the things that we have put in, which is being used, is a welfare loan facility.
Okay.
So, it's confidential. It's very fast. We, in fact, yesterday we received an application, turned it around, and the money was in the employee's bank by lunchtime. And that's an interest-free, no questions asked. I've got an emergency need for up to £500 and it can be paid back through the salary over 6 months with a payment break. So we try to do what we can. That's not going to help everybody. And some people may find it hard to ask for assistance, but we try to do the right thing and take the steps and measures that we're in a position to do so.
That's great. One of the other sort of topical issues at the minute is around diversity, but lots of people are talking about that agenda, but particularly sort of women in leadership at board level, that kind of thing. Obviously, you're operating within a very fast-paced, fast-growing business at board level. What's your kind of take on that whole thing at the minute?
Oh, that's a very difficult one for me to answer, as you know. I can only comment based on my own experience. Yep. And I had a successful career. I'm still having a successful career. Yep. Obviously, there's a little way to go. And I'm a great believer in you make the opportunities for yourself. I always have. And yes, there'll be an element of luck and fortune, but doesn't that apply whether you're male, female, or non-binary? Yeah. That's what happens. Yeah. So I'm a great believer in taking ownership of your own destination and working hard, grafting hard, prove your value. For me, a good leader, a good HR professional, a good HR director, whatever the profession may be, talks by results. Now, maybe sometimes we need a little bit more help to create those opportunities, but they will present themselves. Demonstrate your leadership style. Don't be afraid as a woman to have a slightly different leadership style, because that is a benefit that you potentially bring. I think.
And you mean different to male colleagues?
Yes. And again, everybody's different. We can't generalize. I've worked with lots of male and female leaders who all have their own different particular styles. But use your strengths, play your strengths. What do you need in a leadership role to deliver and add value? Influencing skills is probably one of the biggest. Don't be afraid of empathy. Don't be afraid of listening. For me, that's the key thing, but drive towards delivering the end result.
Brilliant. And a really kind of positive way, I think, to a close. I've really enjoyed chatting. It's been fantastic. I think we've covered a lot of ground, but it's been really, really interesting, and really appreciate you taking the time.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
We'll see everybody next time. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the HRD Talks podcast. Hopefully you found the discussion helpful. If so, please follow us on your podcast provider to be notified of future episodes, and share with friends and colleagues. For more information on the podcast, please visit actons.co.uk/the HRD Talks.